talk about cars because most people want to own a car, want to buy a car. A lot of people want to buy new cars. And we're going to kind of look at how to calculate that payment, kind of look at some other options with cars, okay? Now, the loan payment formula for a fixed installment, so what that means is that you're going to pay the same amount every single month except for maybe the very last month, okay? So what this is your payment is going to be equal to the amount of the loan, so P times the quantity R over N, quantity divided by 1 minus 1 plus R over N to the negative NT, where N is the number of installments, okay? So number of payments per year. So if most of the time for a car payment, that's going to be 12. T is time in years. So how many years are you gonna have it? Okay. So if that's 3 years, 5 years, 30 months, 2.5 years, or whatever it is. Okay. Now, in real life, you're not gonna go to a dealership and write all these numbers out and kind of plug it in there. They have programs that they can just plug in the information and kind of work this out for you. But this is a good idea to kind of give you an idea of the difference in that program. Okay, so let's say you decide you want to borrow $20,000 for a new car. Okay, you have two different loan options. You have a 3-year at 7% and a 5-year at 9%. Okay, so this is going to give you a little bit different payment here. So if I look at payment for loan A, well, I have 20,000 times 0.07 over 12. Okay, and then I'm just plugging in information. 1 minus 1 plus 0.07 over 12 parentheses all raised to the negative 12 times 3. Now, if I plug that on my calculator, and you can do it step by step, you can go 20,000 times 0.07 divided by 12, write that number down, get this number, and then divide it. You're going to have a monthly payment of $618. Okay? Now, if I look at plan B, I have the same amount on the loan, but now my interest and my time is going to be different. So as I put in 0.09 and I divide it by 12, I now have that same formula on the bottom with negative 12 times 5. So I end up paying for another 24 months. And so because I'm paying for a longer time, my payment now is $415. Now, if I were to look at these and kind of compare them, if I wanted to look, my total cost would be $618 times how many months I'm paying. So 36. So this is my total cost. So 618 times 36 is going to be $22,248. So roughly we're going to be paying about $2,248 in interest. Now if I look at the smaller one, so now I have to take 415 times 60. So 415 times 60 is equal to $24,900. And so now on the second one, option B, we're paying $4,900 in interest. You can see that the longer term allows more price, but it does offer a lower amount per month. So those are some things to kind of take into consideration when you're looking at buying an automobile. Do I take a shorter term? The monthly payments is probably going to be quite a bit larger, but I'm going to pay less interest overall. Can I afford that monthly payment? Or do I have to look at my monthly payment and just kind of eat that extra interest? So that's some items that you want to consider when you're looking at, purchasing a car. Well, one of the options that you have when you're purchasing a car is you can look at this option of leasing. So what a lease is essentially what you're doing is kind of renting the car each month. And so there's a term on this lease. So it's usually 2 years or 3 years. And what you're going to do is that you're going to pay a monthly payment each month for the use of that car. Now, some of the advantages of a lease versus owning your car is a lease usually will require you to have a smaller down payment or no down payment, okay? Where sometimes these autos, you actually have auto loans where you don't have to have any down payment down, but your payments are going to be higher, okay? So typically your lease payments are going to be lower than your car payment if you were going to own it. So usually your lease payments are going to be smaller. A lot of times you can lease a nicer car than you could buy. Okay, so you could lease a more expensive car than you'd be able to afford through a payment plan. When the lease ends, you return the car to the dealership and you don't have to be worried about selling it or changing it out. Sometimes you're even allowed to buy that car at that reduced rate and go from there. So some of the pitfalls on leasing though is that when the lease ends, you don't own the car. You're paying a monthly payment to kind of use that car, but you don't get the car at the end. So that money is theirs. Usually there's a mileage agreement on the lease. So if you go over that mileage agreement, you have to pay a amount per mile, and it can be pretty considerable. Sometimes it's 25 cents a mile, sometimes it's more, depends on your lease. And so that can get very, very expensive. So you're responsible for keeping that car in essentially perfect condition. So you have to upkeep it and keep it nice while you're leasing it. It does not cover maintenance, okay? If you terminate the lease early, there are penalties for terminating your lease early, okay? When you own a car, some of this stuff, you don't have those issues, but you have to kind of determine if leasing or owning a car is better. In all these, you have to have auto insurance. Auto insurance is going to be based on your gender, your age, what type of car it is, where you're located geographically. You're going to pay higher rates in different states just because of the amount of cars on the road and who's insured and stuff like that. This is a requirement. If you are leasing or in the process of purchasing it, you have to have full coverage on your car. So that means that you have to be able to, if the car gets damaged, it's there to be able to pay for it. Once you own it outright, you can change your auto insurance to be something else. So that all goes into the cost of car ownership. The nicer your car, the more expensive the insurance is going to be, because they have to take into account what happens if that car gets damaged. How much is it going to cost to get it fixed? So the last thing we're going to do is talk about cost of gasoline. Okay, so the cost of gasoline is your annual fuel expense is going to be equal to the annual miles driven divided by miles per gallon times your fuel cost, so price per gallon. And I know that your price per gallon does change quite a lot. You can probably get an average. So we're going to compare fuel costs here. So we're going to say we're going to drive 24,000 miles per year, and price per gallon is $4. Okay, so nice, expensive there. So we have two cars. We have our hybrid, which gets 50 miles per gallon. And we have our SUV, which gets 12 miles per gallon, okay? and we want to compare our fuel costs. All right, so we're going to look at our fuel costs here, and so we're going to look at our hybrid. Okay, so our annual fuel cost, so miles driven is going to be 24,000. We're going to divide that by 50, and we're going to multiply that by 4. So our annual fuel cost, 24,000 divided by 50 times 4 is going to give us about $1,920 in fuel costs. Now our SUV is going to be 12 miles per gallon. So we're going to take 24,000 divided by 12 and then multiply it by 4. All right, so 24,000 divided by 12 times 4 is $8,000. All right, so we have this substantial fuel cost difference. So this is another thing that you want to take into account when you're looking at purchasing a car. Is how much is the gas going to cost? How much is it going to cost to drive it? It's not much fun if you have a car and you can't drive it because you can't afford the gas. All right, so that's kind of an introduction to cars, how to find the car payment. Like I said, this is usually going to be calculated for you. This loan amount is not necessarily the cost of the car. Okay, so if you go and you see a car that's $5,000, your loan amount might not be $5,000 because there might be some taxes. You'll have sales tax, you'll have dealer document fees. So you have all these other things that add into it. So there's the cost of the car, plus there's some added fees and taxes and items like that. So be aware that that could be added into your payment amount.